Hey there, hunters, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild. Continuing my coverage of the Remnant 2 DLC, and I'm finally getting around to doing build updates. And I want to talk about what I've changed on all my past pre-established builds, and all the stuff I've done before the DLC, because they're still entirely viable, but now they're just a little bit better. I'm still going to be avoiding dots and ritualists where I can for the time being, just because I'm still waiting for all that dot stuff to get hammered out, but in the meantime, we're going to update what we have and work on some other builds. So this video is actually not going to cover any new builds. I will have another video out hopefully tomorrow for that, or the next day, sorry. But I do have a lot of fun new builds to play with and kind of showcase, so stick around for those. I just got to iron them out. But anyway, let's not waste too much time and let's just get into these old builds and update them. So I'm going to start with the bread and butter Hugs builds, which are the most versatile and most powerful builds in the game. They can do anything and will always be the king of DPS, save for some exploits. For my Hugs builds, I use Shotgun Swapper setup, the Skill Loop fully automatic weapon setup, and bow builds. You can of course run Hugs with other builds such as Deceit and Bolt Driver, Sniper Swapper, or even Spore Bloom Swapper with Provisioners, or pretty much any combination of ranged weapons, and Hugs will carry you through the game no problem. These are just the builds that I use. With the Hugs intro out of the way though, let's talk about what's changed for these builds. Now for the Shotgun Swapper build, we really couldn't make much use of anything that was added. I opted to put on the Atonement Ring in place of the Deep Pockets Ring to get some extra crit, which is always appreciated, but that did cost us some of our reload speed from the Provisioner's Ring unfortunately, because our reserves dictate how fast Provisioner Ring can restock our ammo. It's not a required trade, but it is an option that I took. Now because of this, we do actually have to manually reload one weapon slightly more often than before, but I think the extra damage is a fine trade. We also swapped around our mutators and mods. Now we're going to be running corrosive rounds and fetid wounds on our shotgun, as well as hot shot and twisted wounds on our revolver. Reason for that is that now we can run 3 statuses reliably. So with corrosive rounds active, we can sit at 80% crit rate with our shotgun, which is pretty nice. And that also gives us the added bonus of being able to run something like the Ahane Crystal for bosses with unreliable weak spots, but we also stuff that we don't want to use Gambler for. So we can then spend our extra trait points on like Siphoner and get fairly reliable leech through the use of all our dots. It won't let us face tank of course, but it's still good healing. And then for the other 10 points of traits, I actually opted to get Flashcaster, because we're going to be using 2 skills and 2 mods kind of a lot, so it's going to save us some time there. But you can of course opt for Barkskin or Strongback if you want some more bulk as well. Overall though, Shotgun Swapper is still as strong as ever, still pushing 4 to 6k DPS in optimal situations, still one of my favorite setups of all time. Moving on to Skill Loop, the other Hugs fully automatic build. Now originally I had been using this with Challenger to stack Rampage, but since that damage kind of got nerfed a bit, I did move back to Gunslinger for Bulletstorm. I still use Hunter's Mark for consistency, but you can use pretty much any Hunter skill that you want. For this build though, we didn't change too much either. Rather than run Typewriter though, I did move back to Nightfall because it's still just a beast, and it does have faster reload now that I'm back to Gunslinger. I've also included the Ring of Atonement for this build that replaced Provisioner's Ring as well for more crit, which of course is helping us fish for more skill resets through our Devoured Loop. Now the whole reason behind this is that with Nightfall's mod we do gain infinite ammo, so we don't necessarily need to swap weapons to keep our damage up, and because of this we actually don't need Provisioner's Ring. And also because of the extra traits that we got, we're actually grabbing Affliction here for a minute-long Pipe Bomb bleed. So we can sustain our Abrasive Whetstone for a minute rather than 30 seconds by just chucking a Pipe Bomb at the start of a fight. And so this also means that we don't need to use Twisted Wounds on our SMG to help swap to our bleed for our necklace. So SMG is now more for just trash clear, so I've also decided to toss in Refunder, I know it's fucking Refunder, so that when I do use it I can potentially refill some of my ammo on Nightfall. Probably not the best choice here, but I actually don't expect to use SMG much now, because we should be able to rely almost entirely on Nightfall to sustain our skill loop. But that's going to be all for the skill loop. It's still a great setup for automatic weapons, and who doesn't like to sustain Bulletstorm, right? Because Bulletstorm makes Nightfall fully automatic as well, which is really easy on your fingers, and overall it's just a great build. And again, like Shotgun Swapper can push 5-6k DPS no problem, and you're not even going to die once you're in Nightfall's mod form, so yeah, great build. And then the last Hugs build, I don't really have videos for, but I do want to talk about it. It's just charged builds, which are Bows and Deceit, which, like Deceit builds and pretty much all Hug builds, they don't change much here in the updates, aside from maybe slapping on your Atonement Ring, and now we're going to be using Affliction for Pipe Bomb bleeds, but that's about it. Stuff I've basically already covered. Feel free to use any charged weapon on them, but yeah, Deceit, Crescent Moon, Sagittarius, all dumb levels of strong still. But I'm going to wrap up the Hugs builds with that. You get the idea. Hugs basically just got Ring of Atonement, and now we have minute-long bleeds. It's great, but it's not a whole lot. Next on my list of builds was Full Engineer. A lot has actually changed here, and you do have some choices to make, so this is going to be a lot of like little micro comparisons, so bear with me. So Engineer got 2 new items to play with. First is the Terry Booster. 10% damage, 10% crit for heavy carry. You really can't pass that up. Easy choice, best in slot. But now we have more access to skill cooldown and skill duration thanks to the Legacy Protocol, which is a fat 20% skill cooldown and 15% skill duration. That's a lot of overclock. So the problem though is that now you have to decide between the Abrasive Whetstone for 15% crit chance and 30% crit damage versus uptime on the overclock. Now for reference, you're going to be losing about 800 DPS on average if you take off the Abrasive Whetstone and put on the Legacy Protocol. You're going to go from about 5500 DPS to 4700 DPS, plus or minus some buff uptimes. And that's kind of a lot. In exchange though, you do get 32.5 seconds overclock duration with a 24-second cooldown versus a 28.75 second overclock duration and a 36-second cooldown. So 6 seconds of uptime and 12 seconds of downtime. That's 18 seconds, and that's kind of a lot in a boss fight. So you gotta decide if just dropping the overclock for that long is worth the consistent DPS loss overall. Of course, you can also switch it up and run the other skill cooldown rings to get like a 15-second cooldown, which is just another big jump, but also you have to sacrifice more DPS, and at that point I think it's no longer worth it, because you're gonna drop again from about 4700 to about 4k, maybe 4.1k over the duration of the overclock. But that's if you go like complete cap on skill cooldowns and stuff. And then finally though, you could run Whetstone and then run the 2 skill burden rings and get down to about an 18-second cooldown, but retain Abrasive, and that's going to be about the same DPS as before, about 4600, but you're going to lose 4 seconds of uptime to get 6 seconds of cooldown, and now you also have 2 burden rings as well, and make sure you have to sustain bleed. So yeah, sorry, it's a lot to talk about. The Engineer just has a lot of different configs that are really close to each other, which is why it's kind of dealer's choice. But ultimately, I landed on this config here. Now, of course, we have the extra traits, so we also grabbed Siphoner for some leech, but also some extra stamina, which makes this a lot easier to run and jump around with. The last changes I'm using for Engineer is the weapons. Of course, we're running Nebula so we can have the mod deal damage for us while we're running around in our heavy carry, but also we're going to be using Night Guards on our primary weapon. Yes, their damage is pitiful, but they do count as a melee attack, so we can use them to be paired with our Shielded Strikes mutator for our melee weapon, and then they will generate shield for us, which is a nice added defensive layer, basically for free. Our only other option would be to use something like Ring of Spears or Familiar, which, I mean, we have no mod scaling anyway, so those aren't going to deal any damage for us. In the end though, Engineer did get some nice DPS boost in that we can sustain overclock for longer with less of a cooldown. And we did get some extra crit, which definitely helps with, the Ring of Atonement and the Terry Ring. So the sustained DPS is very nice on Engineers, and it's still one of the more unique playstyles in Remnant 2. And so it's always worth checking out, and I do highly recommend playing Full Engineer. Next up we have the melee build, and boy did this one get a glow up. It was already pretty flippin' good too. So I reworked this one almost entirely, but it still slaps hard, like really hard. And now there's a lot more fun things to do with it. Okay, so where do we begin? Alright, first, I made this thing really tanky, because I wanted a melee tank build, but I didn't want to skimp out on any of the damage. So what I had done was spent my extra traits into Fortify, Barkskin, and Siphoner, the bread and butter defensive traits of course. I'm still running medium armor, but at least now I'm sitting at about 57% damage reduction. Plus, I took off Bisected Ring, so we don't have that incoming damage penalty anymore. Now I know what you're thinking, you took off Bisected Ring, how are you going to sustain the stamina? Why even take it off? Well, first, we took it off for Brawler's Pride Ring, 15% melee attack speed. That's huge. So that's just a lot of extra damage. So we gotta grab that. But in order to combat the cost of charged weapon swings, we're also gonna go full drug addict mode. First, in our relic, that we're gonna be using the 30% reduced cost of melee swings fragment. Our Berserker's Crest is also giving us 25% reduced stamina cost for melee charge attacks. We also have the Gold Serum with Gluttony trait, gives us a 2-minute buff that has 50% reduced stamina costs. So if that wasn't enough, we're also using the Verdant Tea concoction to reduce our stamina penalties and increase our stamina regen. So yeah, we basically have infinite stamina anyway, and in turn gain more offense and defense for it. Now because of the Glutton and Potency traits, I also opted to run just more consumables such as Rocket Fuel and Confidence boosters for attack speed and stagger resistance. Not required, but they're still amazing. So yeah, we just went like full druggy this time around. Now for our weapons, I am using the Corrupted Rune Pistol as an offensive mod, so we can mark enemies and just get some extra damage applied to them. But you're more than welcome to run like Nebula for some extra damage, or even the regular Rune Pistol for more healing. I'm also running Ring of Spears for extra melee damage. It's not much, but it's something. I don't even use it most of the time, more for trash clear to be honest. But obviously our guns don't really matter because we're playing a melee build. But what this build ends up becoming is just an absolute beast of a melee build, because yes, it can kill bosses insanely fast. Yes, it can face tank Ravager with Vicious and Spiteful while still pumping out absurd damage. Yes, it can clear the entire screen of ads if you use World's Edge. Yes, you can use Wrathbringer and stunlock bosses to death if you wanted to. It just kinda does it all. And it's in a nice and neat little melee package. You can use whatever weapon you want. You want to run Spectral Blade and just clear out the whole screen, go for it. You want to run Wrathbringer and put on Ring of Atonement instead of Brawler so you can stunlock everything, go for it. It all works. And I said it before, but Melee in Remnant 2 goes hard, and that's still the case. The last build I wanted to talk about is Mod Swapper. Again, another build that really didn't end up changing much, though it certainly did get better. You're free to use whatever mods you want for mod swapping of course, but I'm going with Helix and Corrupted Meridian for explosive scaling. Reason being is that Detonation Trigger will apply a fire dot that can feed mod power back into the build through the Stone of Malevolence. None of my actual trinkets or fragments really changed at all, and the only traits I ended up grabbing were Kinship for some safety and Siphoner for some leech if I get hit. We did end up changing out the long gun though to Sparkfire Shotgun because its fire dot can generate extra mod power through Malevolence to fill our mods just the same as Detonation Trigger could. It's there in the event that we drop our rotation by missing a rocket or something and just kind of lose that mod power gain. We also slapped on the Prophecy Mutator so we can actually sustain this to get a nice flat 30% mod generation buff, which kind of helps everything. And then other than that, we really didn't change much. It still holds up very well as a mod power build and does respectable damage, about 3 to 3.3k with no weak spots required, and it's overall just a really fun build to play. I love swapper builds. In general, I just like alternate styles of dishing out damage, so Mod Swapper, any swapper really, has always just been really refreshing to use. But that's all I really have to say about it. If you wanted to check out the full guide of any of these builds, I have videos of them on my channel. Please check out those and you can see kind of where I'm building from. Now of course I still have the starfuel build to update, and that's waiting for dot changes because dots are all kind of out of whack right now. And of course we have to do a dedicated dot build, but again, wait for changes. But I do have 2 other builds that I will try to bring out tomorrow or the day after. I just wanted to update these builds first before I moved on, plus I have to finalize those builds and test them against some more bosses and stuff, so bear with me on that. I know I'm really slow at getting build updates out. But that's going to be all for me. Thank you all for watching. If you wanted any more information on why I use what I use or have questions, feel free to join my Discord in the description below. But yeah, thanks to everyone who hangs out and chats and supports my content. It's literally the only reason why I'm still around. But anyway, yeah, thanks and good luck out there, hunters.